I still remember the sound of my wedding dress rustling against the marble floor of that tiny church, because it was the only sound I heard when I turned around, looking for my parents in the crowd. They weren't there. But let me back up a bit. 3 months before that devastating moment, I was sitting in my cramped Chicago apartment, surrounded by wedding magazines and sticky notes, feeling like the luckiest girl in the world. I'd finally found him. Marcus. 6'2", dimpled smile, worked construction but quoted poetry when he thought no one was listening. The kind of man who'd hold doors open and remember your coffee order after one date. God, I was so naive. I called my mom that Tuesday evening, practically bouncing in my kitchen chair. Mom, we set the date. June 15th. Can you believe it? Your little girl's getting married. The pause on the other end should have been my first red flag. But I was too high on love to notice the silence stretching like a taut wire. That's wonderful, sweetheart, she finally said, but her voice sounded flat, like she was reading from a script. Your father and I are so happy for you. Looking back, she couldn't even sell that lie properly. See, here's what you need to understand about my family. We're the Hendersons from Naperville, middle class, church-going, Christmas card perfect from the outside. Dad worked insurance for 37 years, never missed a day. Mom taught second grade and baked cookies for every school fundraiser. We looked like we stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting. But appearances, they're funny things, aren't they? My parents had this way of loving me that felt conditional. Like their affection came with invisible contracts I never quite understood. Growing up, I learned to read the room before I spoke, to gauge their moods like a meteorologist tracking storm patterns. I thought I'd outgrown that, but family habits die hard. The wedding planning became this weird dance. Every time I'd call with updates, venue booked, dress picked, flowers chosen. Mom would respond with this strange enthusiasm that felt like nails on a chalkboard. Dad barely said 2 words, just grunted his approval and handed the phone back to her. Maybe they're just stressed about money, Marcus suggested one evening, watching me pace our living room after another awkward phone call. Weddings are expensive, babe. They probably feel bad they can't contribute more. Sweet Marcus, always looking for the good in people. But I knew it wasn't about money. This was something deeper, something that made my stomach churn like I'd swallowed broken glass. The first real crack in the facade came 6 weeks before the wedding. I was at Target, buying thank you cards for the bridal shower gifts, when my phone buzzed. Text from Mom. Sweetie, we need to talk. Can you come over Sunday? Those 7 words, they changed everything. Sunday arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I drove the familiar route to my childhood home, past the elementary school where Mom used to work, past the Dairy Queen where Dad would take me for ice cream after piano recitals. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown up. Their house still smelled like pine sol and Mom's vanilla candles. Dad was in his recliner, pretending to watch golf but really staring at his hands. Mom bustled around the kitchen, making coffee nobody wanted. So, I said, settling onto the couch that had witnessed 1,000 family meetings, what's this about? Another pause. God, these people and their pauses. Mom sat down across from me, her coffee mug trembling slightly in her hands. Honey, we've been thinking about the wedding. Okay? My voice sounded higher than usual, like I was 12 again and in trouble for breaking curfew. Dad cleared his throat, still not looking at me. We think maybe you're rushing into this. Rushing? Marcus and I had been together for 3 years. What do you mean, rushing? Dad, you know Marcus. You've had dinner with him dozens of times. He's a good man. He's not. Mom struggled with the words, he's not what we pictured for you. There it was. The truth, finally crawling out of whatever dark corner they'd been hiding it in. What did you picture? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Someone more established, Dad said. Someone with a degree. A professional career. Someone who could provide for you properly. Provide for me properly. Like I was some helpless maiden who needed rescuing. I have a degree, I reminded them. I have a job. I can provide for myself. Construction work is. Mom searched for the diplomatic phrase, uncertain. What happens when he gets hurt? When the jobs dry up? What about your future children? Our future children. They were already writing Marcus off as an inadequate father to kids who didn't even exist yet. The conversation spiraled from there. They brought up his family, working-class Irish from the South Side. They mentioned his lack of college education. They questioned whether he could elevate me socially. Each word felt like a small betrayal, like they were taking everything I loved about him and twisting it into a flaw. I left that afternoon with my hands shaking and my heart cracked clean down the middle. But I thought. God, I really thought that they'd come around. That they'd see past their prejudices and show up for their only daughter's wedding day. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The weeks leading up to the wedding were torture. Every conversation with them felt scripted, hollow. They'd ask about details, flowers, music, menu, but their hearts weren't in it. They were going through the motions, and we all knew it. 3 days before the wedding, I called one last time. Mom, I just wanted to confirm you and Dad will be there Saturday, right? At 2 o'clock? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Mom? We'll try, sweetheart. Try? You don't try to attend your daughter's wedding. You move heaven and earth. You cancel everything else. You show up. But not my parents. Saturday morning dawned perfect, clear skies, warm breeze, the kind of day that makes you believe in happy endings. I woke up in my childhood bedroom. Mom had insisted I spend the night, said it was tradition. Ha! Tradition. I should have known something was wrong when I came downstairs and found Dad's coffee cup already in the sink. He was always the last one up on weekends, lingering over the sports section and his second cup of coffee. Where's Dad? I asked Mom, who was standing at the kitchen window, staring at the neighbor's fence like it held the secrets of the universe. He had to run some errands, she said without turning around. He'll meet us at the church. Errands. On his daughter's wedding day. The morning flew by in a blur of hair appointments and makeup touch-ups. My bridesmaids, 3 college friends and Marcus's sister Katie, fluttered around me like protective butterflies, making sure everything was perfect. They kept asking about my parents, when they'd arrive, where they were sitting. They'll be there, I kept saying. They wouldn't miss this. But even as I said it, doubt was eating at me like acid. We arrived at St. Matthew's at 1:30. The church looked beautiful, white roses and baby's breath everywhere, soft music drifting from the organ, afternoon sunlight streaming through those gorgeous stained glass windows. Everything I'd dreamed of. Guests were filing in, finding their seats, whispering about how lovely everything looked. I peeked through the vestibule door, searching the crowd for familiar faces. Marcus's family filled up half the church. His mom, dad, 3 brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, a boisterous Irish clan who'd embraced me from day one. They were laughing, crying happy tears, taking pictures of everything. On my side, scattered friends from work, college roommates, my elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson who'd helped raise me when Mom went back to school. But the front row, the seats reserved for the parents of the bride, they sat empty like missing teeth. Where are they? Katie whispered, adjusting my veil for the 100th time. They'll be here, I said, but my voice cracked like a teenager's. 2 o'clock came and went. The priest approached me gently, his kind eyes full of concern. Sarah, we should probably begin. I stared at those empty chairs, feeling something die inside my chest. Not just disappointment, betrayal. The kind that cuts so deep you wonder if you'll ever trust anyone again. They chose not to come. My parents, who'd raised me, loved me, tucked me in at night and helped with homework and cheered at piano recitals. They looked at the most important day of my life and said no. Sarah? Marcus appeared beside me, gorgeous in his navy suit, concern etched across his face. Babe, what's wrong? I couldn't speak. Couldn't form words around the boulder lodged in my throat. He followed my gaze to the empty front row, and I watched understanding dawn in his eyes. His jaw tightened, but when he looked back at me, his expression was pure love. Hey, he whispered, taking my hands in his. Look at me. I forced myself to meet his eyes. We don't need them, he said quietly. We have everyone who matters right here. Everyone who truly loves us and wants us to be happy. Everyone who truly loves us. He was right, of course. Looking out at that church, I saw faces shining with joy and support. Marcus's mom was openly weeping happy tears. My college friends were beaming. Even crusty old Mr. Henderson from next door had shown up in his best suit. These were my people. My real family. Okay, I whispered. Let's get married. The ceremony was beautiful, despite everything. Or maybe because of everything. When Marcus slipped that ring on my finger and promised to love me for better or worse, in sickness and health, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but underneath it was something stronger. Freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing for my parents' approval. I wasn't trying to be the daughter they wanted. I was just me. Sarah Henderson, about to become Sarah Murphy, choosing love over fear. The reception was held in the church hall, nothing fancy, just folding tables covered with white tablecloths and centerpieces made from grocery store flowers. Marcus's aunt had made the cake, 3 layers of chocolate with buttercream frosting. It wasn't Pinterest perfect, but it was ours. And you know what? People danced. They laughed. They toasted our happiness with cheap champagne and plastic cups. Marcus's dad gave a speech that made everyone cry, talking about how proud he was to welcome me into their family. Their family. Not by blood, but by choice. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Text message from Mom. Sorry we couldn't make it. Had a family emergency. Hope it was lovely. A family emergency. I was their family, and I was right here, getting married without them. I showed the text to Marcus, who read it twice before shaking his head. Unbelievable, he muttered. But here's the thing. I wasn't devastated anymore. The sharp edge of betrayal had dulled into something else. Disappointment, yes. Sadness for what we'd lost. But also, clarity. They showed me who they really were. I'd spent 26 years trying to earn their unconditional love, not realizing it was conditional by definition. Their love came with requirements: marry the right man, live the right life, make the right choices. When I colored outside their lines, I lost their approval. But I gained something better. I gained Marcus's family, who loved me without conditions. The next morning, Marcus and I were having breakfast in our hotel room service pancakes and terrible coffee that somehow tasted perfect, when my phone rang. Mom. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Hi, Mom. Oh, sweetheart. Her voice was bright, artificial, like nothing had happened. How was the wedding? I'm so sorry we missed it. Aunt Helen had that medical emergency. Aunt Helen? The woman who'd been dead for 5 years? Mom, I interrupted. Just stop. Stop what? The lies. The excuses. You didn't come to my wedding because you disapprove of my husband. At least have the courage to admit it. Silence. Then, Sarah, that's not, we love you, honey. No, I said, and my voice was steadier than I'd ever heard it. You love the idea of me. The version of me that fits your expectations. But you don't love the real me, because the real me chose Marcus. And in that moment, I chose him too. Over them. Over the approval I'd been chasing my whole life. "You're being dramatic," Mom said, but her voice wavered. "Am I?" "You missed your only daughter's wedding, Mom. You can dress it up however you want, but that's what happened." I hung up before she could respond. Marcus was watching me from the bed, pancake halfway to his mouth. "How do you feel?" he asked gently. I considered the question. How did I feel? "Free," I said finally. "Sad, but free." And I was. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, not because of Marcus and me, but because of the gaping hole where my parents used to be. Holidays were different. I had to learn to rely on Marcus's family for the emotional support I'd always gotten from mine. But here's what I discovered: chosen family can be stronger than blood family. Marcus's mom, Margaret, never made me feel like an outsider. She called me her daughter from day one, not daughter-in-law. She remembered my birthday, asked about my job, hugged me like she meant it. She loved me without conditions. My parents tried to reconcile, in their way. They'd call occasionally, make awkward small talk, pretend nothing had changed. But something had changed. I'd changed. I stopped seeking their approval for every decision. I stopped calling them first with good news. I stopped making them the center of my emotional universe. 2 years after the wedding, I got pregnant. When I called to tell them they were going to be grandparents, Mom cried. Real tears, not the fake ones. "Oh, Sarah," she sobbed. "We've missed so much." Yes, I thought. You have. But I didn't say it. Instead, I said, you don't have to miss anymore. Because that's what grace is, giving people the chance to choose love over pride. They came to the hospital when Emma was born. Dad held his granddaughter with shaking hands, tears streaming down his weathered face. Mom couldn't stop staring at her, like she was seeing a miracle. "She's beautiful," Mom whispered. "Just like you were." Just like I still am, I wanted to say. Even married to a construction worker. But Emma changed something in them. Grandparenthood cracked open their hearts in a way my wedding couldn't. They started coming around more, making an effort with Marcus, learning to see him through Emma's eyes, as Daddy, the man who read bedtime stories in funny voices and built elaborate blanket forts. Love has a way of wearing down the hardest hearts. Now, 5 years later, we have an uneasy peace. They're present in our lives, but the relationship will never be what it was. Too much trust was broken on that June afternoon when I turned around in my wedding dress and saw empty chairs. But maybe that's okay. Maybe some relationships need to break before they can heal properly. Maybe I needed to lose their conditional love to find my own strength. Marcus and I are solid. He still quotes poetry when he thinks no one's listening. He still holds doors and remembers coffee orders. He coaches Emma's t-ball team and builds her treehouses and loves me with the steady devotion I never got from the people who were supposed to love me first. And that's enough. More than enough. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my parents had shown up that day. If they'd swallowed their pride and sat in those front row seats and smiled during the ceremony. Would we have a normal relationship now? Would the hurt have faded into forgotten history? But then I realize. I'm glad they showed me who they really were. Because it forced me to build my own foundation instead of relying on theirs. It taught me that love isn't about meeting other people's expectations, it's about finding people who love you for exactly who you are. Including the parts that don't fit their perfect picture. The empty chairs at my wedding weren't a tragedy. They were a gift. They showed me that I was strong enough to stand on my own, to choose my own family, to write my own story. And what a beautiful story it's turned out to be. Emma asks about that day sometimes, when she sees our wedding photos. Why does Mommy look sad in some pictures? Why are Grandma and Grandpa not there? I tell her the truth, in age-appropriate doses. That sometimes people make choices that hurt the ones they love. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. That family isn't just about blood, it's about showing up. And some people show up. Some people don't. Last week, Emma made me a Mother's Day card at school. Inside, she'd drawn our family, her, Marcus, me, and in the corner, 2 figures labeled Grammy and Papa. They were smaller than the rest of us, pushed to the edge of the paper. Even at 5, she understands the hierarchy. When I tucked her into bed that night, she asked, Mommy, do you still love Grammy and Papa even though they made you sad? Such a complicated question from such a small person. Yes, baby, I said, smoothing her hair. I love them, but I love differently now. Sometimes when people hurt us, our love changes. It doesn't go away, but it grows up. Grown-up love is messier than fairy tale love. It has boundaries and conditions and scars. But it's also more real. More honest. More sustainable. I still think about that June afternoon sometimes. The rustle of my dress, the weight of my bouquet, the moment I realized my parents weren't coming. It doesn't hurt the way it used to, now it's more like an old injury that aches when it rains. A reminder of how far I've come. Because the girl who stood at that altar 5 years ago was still performing for an audience that would never applaud. The woman I am now performs for an audience of people who love her unconditionally, Marcus, Emma, the family we've built together. And that makes all the difference. So if you're listening to this and nodding along, if you recognize the sting of conditional love or the weight of impossible expectations, know this, you're stronger than you think. You can build your own foundation. You can choose your own family. You can turn empty chairs into freedom. The people who show up for you, who celebrate your choices even when they don't understand them, who love you without trying to change you, those are your people. Hold on to them tight. And let go of the ones who don't. Because at the end of the day, the only approval you really need is your own. The only love that matters is the love you choose to give and receive. And sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we create ourselves. 5 years later, I can honestly say that missing wedding was the best thing my parents never did for me. It forced me to grow up, to stand on my own, to choose love over fear. And I've been choosing love ever since. The empty chairs taught me that absence can be just as powerful as presence. That sometimes what people don't do speaks louder than what they do. That you can survive the deepest disappointments and come out stronger on the other side. So here's to empty chairs and chosen families and love that shows up when it matters most. Ever had your heart broken by the people who were supposed to protect it? Share your story in the comments below and hit subscribe for more real talk about family, love, and finding your own way.